Righty. Would you like to call the roll?
I would. Thomas Hildebrandt,
Present.
Carolyn Burseth, Geraldine Port,
Here.
Lisa Anderl,
Here.
Marie Bender,
Here.
Hillary Ette,
Here.
Craig Olson.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome to this November 3rd meeting of the Open Space Conservancy Trust Board. We're here to discuss the capital improvement plan in conjunction with the Parks and Recreation and Open Space plan for the years 2023 to 2028 and other business as may be presented. So first order of business, do we have any public appearances this evening?
We do not have any public appearances this evening.
Okay, then we can proceed directly to the capital improvement plan portion of the Parks and Recreation and Open Space plan. And so you may present the materials if you please.
All right, give me just a moment. My screen just decided to reverse on me here. Okay, good evening, trustees. My name is Jessie Bond and I am the City of Mercer Island City Manager. I am actually leading the pros plan update process because I think most of you know I was formerly the Parks and Rec Director and we needed a little infusion of help because we have so many projects going on right now. So that is why I am in the role. We are nearing the finish line on the Parks, Recreation, Open Space update. In fact, we plan to be handing off a recommendation to the City Council in January. You may recall that the Parks and Recreation Commission is the lead commission on the project. Trustee Bender and a representative from the Arts Council are serving as liaisons to the Parks and Rec Commission. I think Marie's been to 1 or 2 meetings at this point. We just recently shared the draft 2023 to 2028 CIP with the Parks and Recreation Commission. It goes back to them tomorrow, actually. And so what I wanted to do is do a quick touch-in with you on what the proposed CIP looks like. It's a little overwhelming. It's a lot of numbers. I thought what I'd do tonight is give you kind of the high level look at the projects. So you can have a sense of what comprises the CIP, and then interested in any feedback that you have that we can take forward to the Parks and Rec Commission. So I am going to attempt again here to share my screen and I think we'll get started. And just 1 second, I'm sorry. All right. Can everybody see that? Yep. Okay, let's see if I can make it move now. So here's where we are with the pros plan update. We are working through Park Commission review right now. And as I've already mentioned, a handoff to the City Council in January. We are on a hard deadline. We have to have the plan updated, adopted by the council no later than March. And that is to restore our eligibility for grant funds, which as you've seen, we have an unbalanced, if you've looked at the materials, an unbalanced capital plan. So becoming eligible for grants again is of high importance. Why do we have a park CIP? This is a plan, it's not a budget. And it guides your capital program investments across your entire park system. It is required for us to be eligible for many grants and for impact fees. My screen is, hold on a second. And we want to also make sure that, the plan is in alignment with, the CIP aligns with all of our other plans. So our master plans, our comprehensive plan, and our future pros plan. For tonight, as I've already mentioned, I'm hoping that you'll have an opportunity to become familiar with the CIP projects that are proposed. And then we'd like to receive your comments and any feedback you have so that we may carry that forward to the Parks and Rec Commission. I think what's easiest is really just to dive in. I'm going to go pretty quick. I don't know that you need the thesis version of every one of the projects, but just to give you a sense of where we're at. The first thing I want to talk about is funding. I have a very complicated spreadsheet that ties all of the various revenue sources to each of the projects. Most of our funding comes from real estate excise tax, which is the excise that's paid on the sale of a home. And home sales remain very strong on Mercer Island, so that is helping with our capital funding right now. We also receive revenue through things like athletic field rentals, and a portion of that revenue goes into what we call a sinking fund that covers the cost of turf replacement. We have impact fees that are charged on new development. So the purpose of an impact fee is growth pays for growth. So for example, when a facility develops in town center and there's a new housing unit created, we charge an impact fee on that. And we use those funds to pay for new development. We can't use those for maintenance or renovation, but we can use them for things that create new capacity in our park system. And of course, we have a variety of grants you're probably well aware of. We have voted debt right now at Parks Levy that mostly covers maintenance at Luther Burbank Park, but also provides some other funding. We have partnerships, maintenance agreements. So partnership with the school district. We have a maintenance agreement with Washington State Department of Transportation for Aubrey Davis Park. Occasionally we get legislative appropriations. In fact, we got one recently for an Aubrey Davis Park trail safety project. Private donations and sponsorships are certainly in the mix, and I'm sure I missed something, so I dropped in the word other there. A wide variety. Some of these are restricted. Like when we get a grant, of course, it's restricted to a certain project. So what I thought I'd do right now is actually walk you through the projects. Again, not going to go into endless detail, but I want you to at least understand the key themes of the capital needs of our system. So first of all, this map, and this is a slide actually intended for the Parks Commission tomorrow, but we do have a map that's in development. It's up there on the screen for you. It shows where all of the proposed capital projects are. We'll be updating that, and that will go into the pros plan. So you can just get a sense that we're intentional about spreading our resources out across Mercer Island. Certainly some of our bigger facilities like Luther Burbank and Aubrey Davis Park drive a lot of resource needs. Again, I'm not sure how much interest you have in athletic fields, but I at least want you to understand the investments that we need to make in those types of facilities. So the themes for athletic fields are safety and maintenance. We have numerous backstop replacement projects in the mix, and I'll show you a couple images in a moment. We have a number of fields that are due for turf replacement. Synthetic turf only lasts about 10 years, so we have to replace it. And it has to meet a certain compaction rating. Because we have so many big projects, we're looking for opportunities to combine them to be more efficient. In fact, we're proposing to put several of them together into 2023 into a mega project, which may save us on resources in terms of design and construction. So here's a quick snapshot. This is Aubrey Davis Park. And by the way, this presentation, it's in order of the way the projects showed up in your documents, not necessarily in chronological order or by number. So this is the Ferroglia fields at Aubrey Davis Park. And this is one location where we have old backstops. If you ever walk through Aubrey Davis and you know there's a baseball game going on, you are perhaps getting hit by a fly ball. So this is one of the projects where we're proposing to upgrade the backstops and Basically what that means, and you'll see it on a number of other facilities, is we go in, we put in the tall backstops, and we run tall fences and netting all the way down the foul ball lines. That's a best practice now in the industry. So this is one of those projects. It's out a ways in 27, 28. This was also where, no, this isn't the one. I had an error in one of the projects. This wasn't it. The number probably seems like, wow, that's a lot for a backstop replacement. There's actually 2 backstops on this field, and there's quite a bit of engineering that goes into doing any construction on top of the lid. So we've estimated high on this project just to make sure our costs are covered. I want to talk a little bit about Island Crest, and again, I'm not going to go into great detail. One of the projects is to install turf at the Southfields at Island Crest Parks. They're currently grass, and to replace the lights. This is important because it will expand the capacity of the field. So rather than having a whole bunch of grass fields, we can install turf and expand the use of this one field. Because this increases capacity, we can use impact fees for this project. This is also out of ways 25, 26. All right, moving on to more urgent projects. You'll see, I'm not sure I completed my exercise of putting these little triangles with exclamation points on all of the slides. But when you see that symbol, it means we have to do it now. If we wait, it usually means a project's or facility may close. So here's an example. The North Fields at Island Crest Park are due for turf replacement. The turf was installed in 2012. We don't have the option. We have to replace the turf. Otherwise, we won't pass compaction testing and we'll have to close the facilities. So this is proposed as a 2023 project. When we go in and do the turf, we're also proposing to upgrade the backstops. Again, this is a common safety theme throughout the system. And while we're doing that work in 2023 on the North Fields, we're also going to go ahead and replace the Southfield backstops. This is where I had the number error. I think in your packet materials, the project was estimated around $100,000. It's actually closer to $3 million. So we're combining these 2 projects into one big athletic field project. If you've been out to Island Crest for a baseball game or just walking through, you know, it's pretty tight in there and the foul balls do fly over those fences. So it's important to make these safety improvements. We also have a project where we have to replace the turf at the South Mercer Playfields. This is a school district property that is, you know, it's owned by the school district, managed in cooperation with the city. We have turf on the infields down there. There's three fields. The turf was installed in 2010. We're going to be pushing it a little bit, but the turf on the infields, it's looking okay. So this will also be a 2023 project, and similar theme, we'll be replacing all of the backstops at those fields as well. So that is the big mega project I was talking about. We're proposing to combine all the Island Crest Park projects and the South Mercer projects into one for design, bidding, and construction. We will be able to fund a portion of these projects using our sinking fund, which is revenue that we collect off of athletic field and rentals. Unfortunately, we don't have enough to cover the full replacement, so we'll be talking to the school district and certainly the city council about how we close that funding gap. Beaches and shorelines, this might be a little more interesting to the Open Space Trust. I will certainly flag the Clark Beach project for you. Key themes here, we certainly heard during our engagement process that beaches, waterfront access, and water-oriented programs are one of the highest priorities of our community. Not surprising, we're an island, we have lots of wonderful beaches. The challenge we have right now, to be frank, and this category of projects is really what's driving most of our financial troubles in the capital program, is that most of our beach infrastructure, dock infrastructure is 50 years old. And it's at the end of its useful life, and it's in a little bit of trouble. So we need to either replace these facilities or decommission them. And the problem with decommissioning these docks is that we would never be able to build them back the way they are now. So we really want to renovate and take that approach before they fail. Certainly our beach projects also, we're seeking to address ADA accessibility where we can. That was an identified weakness in our park system. I will remind you, these are the most complicated projects we do. They take many years of planning, many years of permitting, and they're very, very expensive. I think all combined, we have over $10 million in beach and dock work proposed in the CIP. So you may be familiar with the Luther Burbank Park projects. This is one piece of it. It's the swim beach renovation. This is a $1.2 million project. We've separated it actually from the dock project. They can be separated. So you can see here in this image, we've got a swim beach. If you've been out there, it's got hardened bulkheads. What we're looking to do, we'll be renovating this whole area, providing ADA access, and also bringing ADA access from the south parking lot at Luther to the beach. Right now, we don't have any ADA access to this beach. This is a ways out. I don't feel that this is a strong contender for grant funding, except that the ADA accessibility may be. So this is a very expensive project, but this is also a regional park that gets a lot of use. So we're interested in getting this project done. More near term, you may have heard about all the work we've been doing on the Luther docks. We are in progress right now with design of the Luther Burbank dock replacement project. And we've been actually quite successful with grant funding on this one. And this project, of all the ones on the CIP, will likely garner the most grant funding. In fact, we are semi-confidently estimating around $2 million in grant funds, maybe even a little more when all is said and done. So we don't have time tonight to go through the whole dock project, but this is renovating North Pier, South Pier. We're putting in a floating dock for hand-powered watercraft. We will be addressing ADA accessibility, renovating the restrooms. And as I've already mentioned, there's grant funding here, but this is still, even with $2 million of grant funds, we're still in need of almost $2 million more to complete the project. Moving on, Groveland Beach. If you've been out to Groveland, it is also a beloved beach, many, many years old. We did some work. In fact, if you're not sure where Groveland is, we've got a map there and it's showing up in the little circle. Those are some images from Groveland. So what we've done, what we're going to be proposing to the city council is that we do a joint master plan for Groveland and Clark Beach parks, and that we actually accelerate the work. So when we go to council in January, it's a heads up for you, Lisa, we're going to ask to fund the master plans for Groveland and Clark in 2022 so that we can get going on this work right away, because we need a plan for, we don't have a plan yet for what's going to happen out here, but we need the plan so that we can put together the funding proposal. We did some work on the Groveland docks a few years back. It really only bought us 10 years of dock life. So we're pushing up against the end of the life of the dock. You can also see we've got, in fact, I'll use my mouse here. There's a bulkhead here, a low bulkhead. And if you look close, if you look over the edge of the bulkhead is undermined. And so when we do the major renovation at Groveland, we will probably take that bulkhead out, build it up a little bit, pull it back, and then we're proposing like a zero entry beach, something that will withstand another 50 years of use. So this is a major project. We're estimating over $4 million in 2027 to do this work. And by the way, Groveland, there's a whole nother park attached to Groveland. This is just the beach. It also needs some love, and it's not showing up yet in our CIP. I think we'll wait until we do the planning to come back to that. Clark Beach, and I thought this one might be a little more interesting to the trust. We've also got a placeholder in here for renovation at Clark Beach Park, close to $3 million in 2025. Again, pending completion of a master plan. And this is another, you can see what they were doing 50 years ago, right? They were hardening shorelines. We've got an old dock that's on the verge of failure. And we also have a swim enclosure that is like steel in the water. And this is gonna need to come out at some point. As you can imagine, the permitting to take out this enclosure is gonna be a monster. We're gonna have to deal with a whole bunch of sediment, and it's going to be very, very complicated. This enclosure is not something we can maintain. I'm gonna stop short of saying it's not safe because we inspect it regularly, but we would never build this today. So the good news about Clark Beach, and at least what the vision is now, is we think there's an opportunity here to restore the shoreline to a more natural shoreline. You know, Clark Beach is a more natural park, and there's some real opportunities there. And because of that, because we're probably going to be pulling out some of these bulkheads, taking out the swim enclosure, we do think there's opportunities for grants, you know, environmental restoration. There's lots of grant opportunities there. But I'm getting ahead of the master planning process. So that's just our early vision of what we think needs to happen out here. I'm going to keep going, and I promise we'll come back and do questions. I think it's probably better just to get through the list. So open space and trails, the open space areas and the trail projects are combined into one category. And, you know, so some of the key themes in the community engagement process for the PROS plan, trails and trail connections were by far the top priority. That's pretty typical across most communities. And walking was the top activity. Again, pretty typical across the nation. I will also say that preservation, maintenance, and restoration of open space was a very high priority. In fact, in our second survey, that definitely came out clear as day. So the CIP includes ongoing resources for open space management and trails. And there's a couple buckets. So the first one is a bucket of about $300,000 a year for general open space management and maintenance. That's system-wide. And one of the things we're proposing to do differently is we used to hold that number steady. We didn't inflate it. So we're proposing to inflate it. Now, how we pay for those that growth over time, we're still figuring out. But I think it's important to keep the dollars whole as we move from year to year. We also have a trail renovation budget. That's just to go out each year and do kind of major maintenance on our existing trails. It's probably underfunded, to be honest with you. But we're dealing with not enough revenue for the long list we have. So it's about $50,000 a year. And again, we inflate it by 3% in the proposed CIP. And then we also have dedicated resources just for Pioneer and Inkstrom. You're probably familiar with these funds. About $180,000 starting in, I think it's 2021. So when you get to 2023, you can see the 3% escalators being applied. And that's for a variety of projects at Pioneer and Inkstrom. And when we get to the discussion part of the meeting, I think Elaine can explain that we haven't typically specified projects, you know, open space projects. We allow the open space team in collaboration with the trust to figure out and prioritize the projects as we go. So that's why there aren't specific projects in the CIP. Really quickly, the trails, we've got a handful of trail projects and one really fun open space project that I'm excited about. This is the Luther Lid Connector Trail. It's a staircase, and my screen is cutting off here, from North Mercer Way and 84th Avenue to the Mountains to Sound Trail at the Luther Lid. Right now there's a social trail that's really steep. This project is, you know, nearly ready to go. We put it out in 2024, 25. It already has approval by WashDOT, and it was identified in both the Luther Burbank and Aubrey Davis Park Master Plan. And so again, you know, what I'll tell you about these projects is this project doesn't have to happen. It's not at risk of failure like the docks I was just talking about, but we plug it in because trails and trail connections are such a high priority for the community. Trail pavement renovation. This one's not very excited. It's basically funding to go fix the Mountains to Sound Trail through Aubrey Davis. I think this is probably going to end up being a somewhat ongoing funding request. We are hopeful for some cost sharing from WashDOT on this. This is likely route upheaval. We've got problems, you know, throughout the trail system with that. You're probably well aware. This is the Mountains to Sound connection at Shorewood. Again, this is a This is an opportunity to separate bikes from pedestrians and to make a short trail connection to improve the trail. I won't spend a lot of time on these. This is the Mountains of Sound trail lighting. This is along, it's Island Crestway to Shorewood, but if you're familiar with this giant retaining wall, it gets really, really dark. And so the proposal is to light this section of trail. We don't light a lot of our trails. I think we've kind of stuck with the let's not light nature kind of philosophy, but in this area, it is a bit of a safety issue. So that's what this project is, out in 26 to 27. This is one I wanted to talk to you about, Hollerbach open space, which I had a typo. I spelled it with a K in the spreadsheet, so I fixed that. This is an open space area that we don't have access to, hence the picture there of greenery. This project proposes to put a trail in from 90th Avenue Southeast to Cedars East Road, which I don't have a great map of, but it will be an important east-west connection. And I think what's really possibly not often thought of is until we get the trail in, we really have trouble stewarding this property. So it opens up a whole realm of opportunities for us to get in and do some great maintenance. Because this is a new trail, it will be eligible, we'll be able to use impact fees for it. We've also got a trail extension at Upper Luther. Again, I won't go into great detail. Most of these trails are just connections that we're trying to make. Lisa, did you want to ask a question or, till the end?
Oh, it can wait till the end. I just thought I'd forget it.
That's okay.
It's quick about Hollerbach. I mean,
Yeah.
how do we access it for maintenance?
We don't. I mean, Elaine's here. She could probably answer that question better. It's pretty much being preserved in its natural state right now, I believe.
Yeah, so we have done a fair amount of restoration over the years in this. It has very restricted access there. We have one easement on the east side, just a little access easement. And then we have some little various right-of-ways that dead end into the open space. And unfortunately, those terminate right at some very, very steep sections. So it's been a challenge for contractors. This has been a really, really tough one. And I think probably we pay a premium to have them go in there because access is so difficult. So having a trail through there will really open up, I think, the potential for us to handle some of the issues that we have in there with invasives and replanting.
Okay, thanks.
We get in there very creatively. The Mercerdale Hillside Trail renovation. I think it's been a while since I tortured myself on the stairs at Mercerdale, but we've got a lot of timber constructed steps throughout our park system. Those don't last. So this is a pretty important project, pushing up on $1 million to renovate the trails on the Mercerdale hillside. And finally, at Wildwood Park, which is a really nice kind of neighborhood amenity, we're proposing to put a perimeter path, formalize a walking loop for the users of that park. And it's also pretty conducive to ADA access. So what I will say about the trails and open space projects is, again, none of them are on the risk of failure, except that we need to keep investing in managing and maintaining and restoring our open space. But they were such a high priority that we programmed them in. So it's going to be an interesting conversation because we are unbalanced with our CIP, but we felt strongly as staff that all of those projects needed to be included. Whoops, I lost my screen here. This is where part of the presentation isn't quite finished yet, but we had a category of other. I will just mention we have some projects, intersection improvements on the Mountains to Sound Trail that will be funded through the transportation program. I'm not going to bother you with those today. We also have funding for Ellis Pond. This is not a capital project, but let's call it a planning project. It's an evaluation of the pond and its habitat needs. I thought you might be interested in that. It's a landlocked pond, and so we're concerned that if we're not paying attention to it, the nutrient load and it's going to start to fail. Also, good news, we can use the stormwater fund to pay for this planning work. And so that's about as far as we've gotten. We just said, hey, we got to pay attention to Ellis Pond. We're not doing any work on it, and it matters. So that's that project. Park planning, we have 3 major plans in the queue. The first one is the Mercerdale Park Master Plan. And I'll tell you the urgency on this one is that we are proposing to replace the sewer line that runs right through the park. If you can see my mouse. If you ever stand out at Mercerdale Park, there's that little depression kind of that runs through the middle of the park. That's where the sewer line is. And our sewer plan calls for expanding that sewer pipe, which we believe needs to be done. And when that happens, the whole park's going to be dug up right through the middle and it will be closed. So this is the moment where if there's any other improvements we'd like to make, now would be the time to plan for it. So we'll be recommending to the council that they fund a master plan in 2023. We're in the process of upgrading the playground equipment, but there's some other things out there like the age of the restroom building, and certainly the skate park is quite old that needs to be looked at. I've already talked about these. This is Groveland and Clark Beach combined master plan. And I mentioned when we go to the council in January, we're going to ask them to accelerate the funding so we can start this master plan in 2022. And I'll be honest with you, I anticipate needing to have a conversation about a ballot measure of some sort to fund some of this infrastructure. And we can't really have that conversation until we know what exactly needs to happen at Clark and Groveland, because they're 2 of the really big ticket projects. And also, you may not be aware of this, maybe you are, there's a building behind the community center that we call the Annex. It's one of the original buildings on site. It is in terrible shape. It's leased for two separate preschools. And this has been bounced around for a bit, but we really need to do a plan to either renovate the buildings or replace or demolish. They're really beloved, they're highly used. So I think our community is going to want us to find a way to keep them, but in their condition, they're not going to last much longer. In fact, they were only supposed to, be operational till like 2009. So we've been duct taping and band-aiding them together. So it's time. It's time. We may also ask the council to accelerate funding so we can start planning, do the planning work in 2022. Okay, given the time and how many more slides I have, I'm going to speed it up. These are the park projects. Just want you to be aware of them. Really, our focus on parks is maintaining what we have. I think there's only one truly new amenity proposed in the parks list, and these are different than all the other projects you just saw. We also have recurring funding that we use to support our parks projects, parks minor maintenance, vegetation management. And that last one on your slide, the Luther Burbank minor capital levy, that is tied to the parks and operations levy that's going to end in 2023. So if that levy isn't renewed, we lose $100,000 plus 1% of important revenue for capital projects for your park system. We have a project to allow us to use lake water irrigation at a number of our properties. This one is, we have approval to do it. We just haven't implemented it. So we've said we're going to get it done. This will allow us to save a little bit of money on irrigation expenses. So that's what that project is, 24-25. We have a whole slug of playground replacements. This gets back to that big theme of we have aging infrastructure. So here's one. This is lid B. And Meryl, we're gonna have to put a map on this slide, but this is right across the street from the grass field. This is the basketball court back here. This is the washtop maintenance facility. So this is a this is a playground replacement, ADA access. This is getting ADA access off of West Mercer Way to the playground and to the basketball court. The playground is getting up there in age, so we're gonna have to plan for its replacement. I will remind you in terms of a liability standpoint, once we have a robust playground safety inspection program. Once something can't be repaired, the playground gets shut down, which unfortunately is what happened in Mercerdale Park. Also, this is, to my recollection, the one new amenity, and I'm sorry, this isn't the greatest screenshot, but this is from the Aubrey Davis master plan. So this is the west side of Aubrey Davis Park. This is that playground I was just talking about. This is the tennis courts. So this project, which is out in 2026-27, will add a new restroom building. It was proposed to be either here or here. I think it'll be next to the playground. We'll also make an ADA connection from the parking to the restroom. This is, interestingly enough, one of your top requested amenities in our community engagement process was restrooms. And this is where we think we need one the most. So that's what that project is. We have some funding in here for enhancements to the Greta Hackett Sculpture Park, which is central Aubrey Davis, right in the town center. Enhanced security, probably some lighting, and probably some sculpture replacement and some overhaul. This will be in partnership with the Arts Council. The tennis courts, we actually have 2 tennis courts that need some love. One of them is at Aubrey Davis Park. If you've been up there, you can see the cracks running through the court. We are proposing to resurface the tennis court and possibly stripe for pickleball use as well. And the other tennis courts that need even more love than Aubrey Davis is the Luther Burbank Park tennis courts, where we anticipate we'll either restripe, well, they're striped for pickleball. We're talking about maybe taking out a couple tennis courts and converting to dedicated pickleball. That decision hasn't been made, but this budget would allow for either option. So pickleball was probably one of our top requests through the community engagement process. This is a lighting project in 2023 at Luther Burbank, the North Lot. We do have a number of car break-ins and the lighting is just really, really poor here. So this has been on the list for a while. This is another safety project. Playground. Here we have another one, Roanoke Park. The playground is going to age out. So we'll be replacing the playground, and that's part A. Part B will be other improvements to Roanoke. This is a north end park. That's not a great photo. It does get a lot of shade. And this will also address ADA. And what I want to point out, this is plaguing us throughout our park system. See all these curbs? We have curbs around all of our playgrounds, and it's one of the #1 problems we have with ADA access. So when we go and rebuild, we either flatten them out or we just make sure there's a little cut here that there's a ramp to get from a parking lot into the playground. Okay, Dean's Children's Park is another playground that needs to be, we have a lot of playground equipment out there in phases. It will need to be replaced. Up next is the Castle Swings and Climbing Rock. First Hill, apologies, we don't have photos in the presentation yet. This is another community park on the north end where we've got aging equipment. Playground equipment will need to be replaced. By the way, you know, the Mercerdale Park playground replacement is north of $800,000. That's a pretty sizable piece of playground equipment. So you can kind of tell by scale, this is a more modest playground piece. We intend to get ADA access everywhere we can. So just to give you some perspective. The amphitheater, we have in the CIP funding for the design only. This beautiful and very old wood structure is melting into the earth and needs to be redone. So we've got pretty significant rot, electrical problems. We're proposing to design it first because I think there was a number of ideas of what could happen here. And then I do think it would be eligible for grant funding, cultural arts grant funding. Another stair project could go in the trails category. This is to get you from the community center to Luther Burbank, the north lot and back. All of the stairs are failing. They need to be replaced. This is a pretty high use route. So it's a priority. I think the price tag may actually go up a little bit more than what we've got in the plan right now, but we'll keep it for now. Secret Park, same theme, another playground that's going to have to be replaced in the next 6 years. South Point Landing, I do need to get you a photo of this, but you know, one of the opportunities, we have all these wonderful street ends and many of them aren't developed. And so in the pros plan, one of the ideas was, hey, go fix up some of your street ends because they, you know, they're small, but they provide really important waterfront access. So amidst all the other big projects, we did identify South Point Landing as one of the first street ends that we'll make some investments in. Finally, last but not least, and I've got a few more quick slides, we are proposing to establish a property acquisition reserve. This is to start putting money away for property acquisition. And this has been hard. I know previous city councils have talked about doing this. When you have all these other capital demands pushing up against the priorities, it's hard to set aside money. But what we're advocating for, and I think what we heard from the community, is we need to start setting some money aside for acquisition projects in the future, even if it's just a little bit each year. The community center, I'll be super quick here. We do set aside money from your capital budget every year to keep the community center going. Not just building repairs, but also to keep up on technology and equipment replacement. So think about all the furniture at the community center. It's all got to be replaced over time, all the technology, the PowerPoint projectors. So we dedicate money for that. We've got a few projects, pavement replacement project at the entryway to the community center. The pavement's failing. That's pretty near term. We need to get that replaced. I don't know why we did this. But when we built the community center, most of the planter beds in the parking lot it's basically the existing soils were the leftover from the construction, and it's not good dirt. And so all the plants are struggling. So we want to dig all that out and do a LID treatment or a stormwater quality treatment project there. So that's that project. We're wanting to expand our generator horsepower at the community center. We've got some. It keeps our main circuits going, but your community center is your Red Cross emergency shelter on the island. And right now we don't have enough power to keep the whole thing going. So we're proposing a future generator project. And we do think we'll be able to get some grant funding for that. The boiler building, this is in the Luther Burbank master plan. I think this is our last project, and I will stop talking. One of the themes in the community engagement process was waterfront. You know, we want to be on the water. We want waterfront programs. We want waterfront activities. The boiler building is proposed to be a boathouse. That's how it's called out in the Luther Burbank master plan. So we've put it in. It's a big ticket item, but if we're going to provide waterfront programs and boating programs, we need a place to do it. So that is that project. Where we are, again, working through the CIP right now this month, and then getting ready to hand off to the council in January. So that was a really fast project overview, but I know I talked for almost 40 minutes. So let me just show you one more thing real quick here, and then I promise you I will stop. So you got a version, you got a handful of spreadsheets in your packet. And what I really want to draw your attention to on all of the packet material is this is a very complicated spreadsheet feeding into this, but you have a total expenditure, a total projected revenue, and then a net for each year. And you can see that right now, based on all of these projects, we're upside down by about $25 million. It's a pretty shockingly large number. It's not a surprise to me because we've been talking about all of our infrastructure needs for a while, but there it is. The question I've got from the Parks Commission is, Jesse, what are you thinking? You can't present an unbalanced CIP. Well, we feel that we need to at this point. And just remember, it's a plan, not a budget, right? It's a plan. So what this does is it allows us to talk about all these projects that need funding, and if the plan's adopted, to go find the funding, you know, through all those things I listed earlier: grants, partnerships, possibly even, you know, a ballot measure. So, did I lose you guys? You stayed with me? Again, I wanted to give you the whole kit and caboodle. Maria, I'm going to apologize because you're going to see basically that presentation again tomorrow night, probably with a few enhancements. What questions do you have? What feedback do you have? You ready to start the bake sales to raise the money for these projects? Let's see here.
Oh, I see a couple hands raised. Lisa,
Oh,
Good. you wanted to speak during the presentation, so how about you go first?
yeah, well, I mean, I got my question answered on the Hollerbach open space, but the question that I had on the Parks Land Acquisition Fund, is that something we could put in the Parks levy if we renew that and ask, you know, our citizens, look, are you willing to put money in a piggy bank to where we don't have to pull that out of the general fund?
I think that's, I have to tell you, I've been thinking a lot about if that would garner votes. And so I think the answer is yes. Could that become a part of your levy renewal? Yes. I think we'll have to ask, you know, is it better to put other projects out on the ballot and fund that with existing CIP? But yeah, I think we should look at it, a dedicated stream of revenue into that reserve.
Thanks. That was it for right now.
Yeah,
Craig had a question.
sure, go ahead, Craig.
I was just curious why does the CIP start in 2023 instead of 2022?
That is a great question. I should have put that in a slide. It's because you already have the city already has an adopted 21-22 budget.
Okay.
In fact, I should also explain this. We're kind of in this weird process where the pros plan update and this, which will include a CIP, is happening now. The council will adopt it. And then in the spring and into the fall of next year, they'll go look at the CIP again. And so we're ahead of the budget process. I think the projects may stay the same, knock on wood. I mean, we may move some things around. What I do anticipate will change is the REIT, the real estate excise tax revenue projection. The REIT projections are looking really good right now. And so I'm hoping to grab some of those resources to help balance 23 and 24 of this park CIP. So that's what I think will happen in 2022 as we get closer to the fall budget update. Yeah, so that's why we started in 2023.
Okay, let's hear from Jerry next. Jerry, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. The slides you had about the open space and the trails, I wondered how some of those maintenance and preservation funds compare to existing or to recent expenditures. So 100,000 for open space management, 50,000 for the trail renovation and property management, and 150 for Pioneer Angstrom.
So that is about on par with what we have done historically. The difference is I've now plugged in that escalator, so it's going to start going up 3%, provided we can fund it. Before we were, and Elaine can jump in here because she's been here a lot longer than I have. Before we were holding those numbers constant. So every year we were buying a little bit less and a little bit less. Elaine, did I about get that close enough?
I'm not sure we totally are on the same page about this, Jesse, because I actually believe the current budget that we have adopted right now is the first time it hasn't escalated.
Oh, okay.
Know what the escalator has been in the past, but it's been commensurate with CPI. So we can go back and look at what some.
That's great.
But these 2 years are really the only 2 years that I've seen that are right on par with each other.
And what you're probably observing is we have not been consistent in escalating our projects. And so what we intentionally did this time is made sure we had an inflation factor in the CIP. Oftentimes what the city was doing is we would adopt the CIP in 2021 dollars, Especially in a construction market like we're in right now, you were immediately short by the time you got to the next year. So that's why we've layered in that 3% inflation. And I'm glad to hear that those numbers maybe were inflated because they weren't through the rest of the CIP. I apologize.
Yeah, I think that's it's a great thing to just talk about, you know, making sure that there's a steady inflator in there. I will say that even though we have had inflation increases over time, there have been various adjustments to those budgets. So it wasn't always the final budget that out at the end of the biennium.
So continuing on the subject of budgets and how we're going to fill them, do we have any comments from Hillary or Carolyn that for questions, comments or questions?
Yeah, so I have had my hand up, Gary. So I apologize for joining late. I thought I knew where the link was for this meeting. And I was having technical difficulties joining you. But as someone who, and maybe you covered this in the first 10 minutes or so, but as someone who's seeing a lot of this at the first time, as I suspect others will be doing as you go forward with this, it becomes very confusing, you know, because the number of things that you're looking at and, you know, you got different dates, and it might be useful if you could construct some sort of timeline, either at the beginning or at the end, you know, that lays out, you know, when each of these are going to happen. Because, you know, I found myself saying, well, yeah, let me see, this is 2027 and it's going to be, you know, $4 million. And I was having trouble, you know, keeping track. So I think just, you know, if you could find some way to layer that in there, I think that would be helpful in keeping, you know, everyone organized as to, you know, where you're driving with it. You know, because I look at this, and maybe another one, you know, would be to at least maybe have a couple of bullet points about how you set the priorities of, you know, which one's the most important, and the timing of how you chose to do it. Because, you know, as I look at each of these things and the things that you're presenting, they're all incredibly important.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be helpful, you know, maybe to bring me along or to bring along, you know, whoever you're going to be showing this to, you know, sort of how you landed here where you did land.
I can think about that. The numbers part of this has been pretty complicated. It's eaten
Sure.
time. I will say this, some of the projects, because they're slotted in 2023, it's because there's an urgency.
Yeah.
Some of it is sequencing, you know, so if you think about, you know, we have to figure out how to get all this done as well with existing resources, and that's
Right.
a lot of project work. But what we try to do is stagger. So you don't have everything under construction at once. You don't have everything in design at once. So like when we look at the shoreline projects, those are major complicated projects. We're doing Luther Burbank right now. We put Clark next in line, and then Groveland. And you know, we tried to keep our lives sane by spreading it out. So sometimes, you know, there's a lot of different reasons why things got sequenced the way they did.
No, I understand that that's what's happened. I'm just saying in terms of, you know, actually, you know, showing the material, I think it would be helpful, you know, to walk people kind of through how you went through it, because I understand you can't do it all at once. It's kind of like if I'm a homeowner, you know, and I've got 4 major projects and I can only afford to do, you know, one every 18 months or so, you know, I go through a thought process, right?
Well, I'm happy to spend time offline with anyone that has more questions. I did give you a really high flyover. You saw how many projects we had to go through tonight.
Yeah.
I skipped over a lot of the details. I will say we obviously took into account community feedback. That's why your beaches and shorelines, your trails and open space are prioritized, not to mention infrastructure. We obviously meet with staff in the field, Elaine, her team, to make sure we're capturing the things that are, you know, critical. We spent, we have a consultant on this pros plan update, and one of the consulting team members spent a month in our park system just evaluating the infrastructure. So we have that whole report as well that helped drive this. The cost estimating, that's a whole nother exercise.
All right, Hillary, you had a question or comment?
Yes. So my question was piggybacking. I can't remember who it was who had asked before if we are increasing the trails maintenance budget. I think it was Jerry who asked that. And I'm curious with the connectivity and the access to Hollerback, in terms of all the restoration efforts there, are we not going to be hiring any more seasonal staff on the natural resources crew, or is that going to be grant funded?
Okay, go ahead.
So this plan, the one, when we're just looking at the capital list, it's a little short-sighted, right? Because it's not taking into account the other piece,
And your Legos for now?
our staffing needs. So right now we haven't contemplated additional staff requests, but that would be something as these new facilities come online, because you're right, we are adding new trail connections that Elaine and her team, and I'm sorry, Sam, I forgot you were here. Sam is here, one of our maintenance managers. They would be making those asks. I will say, going back through the budget today for the 50th time, I don't think we have enough money in the ongoing trail maintenance budget. And so it's something I may look at before we make a final recommendation to the council. Elaine, did you want to say anything
Thank
about
you.
it, since you're actually in the field?
No, I think it's a great point that Hillary makes about it. I will say, like I had mentioned to Lisa, that Hollerbach is enrolled in restoration already, maybe not quite as extensively as it would be, but I agree on the trail maintenance side that certainly there's a need for additional, resources if they become available. So the trails can always use a little bit of help and upkeep, and staying on top of them really does pay dividends, so that we don't, once they start to backslide, it's harder to get them back into good shape. So, so routine maintenance is really key.
Something else to think about too is we're managing a lot of aging infrastructure, which eats a ton of time and resources. And as we replace things, like I think about the Mercerdale Hillside, that trail system, it does start to drive down, at least for a short period of time, your staff needs, because things are new. So we have to balance that.
I think that's a really great point, Jesse, and probably one I should have brought up, which is that a lot of these trail systems were constructed right around the same time with timber crib stairs. And so their rate of deterioration it's all about the same time, which means that we're getting to the point where Andy and his seasonal crew are going out and replacing treads every single summer, and taking up an enormous, replacing treads on an existing stairway is no small feat anyway, but the fact that their deterioration is accelerating now, I think that's when we started looking at this and saying, our maintenance costs would go down enormously, and we know they need to be replaced anyway, so.
Good. So Marie, you had a question?
Sorry. Yeah, well, not really a question. I did want to kind of make sure other people spoke up first. And the comment that I heard about trails, I would have to suggest that maybe it would be, because I'm a little overwhelmed also about we're doing all these trail projects, but they don't gel. A map that said, here's our trails, and here's this trail's going in 2026, and that one's in 2028. To give people a sense that this is how the island is going to get connected would be, I think, a really good idea. And then Elaine has been enormously generous with her time. And she and I have spent quite a bit of time talking over the last week or so. And one thing I did not appreciate, and Elaine, you probably want to talk about this, is why is it Pioneer Park has one line item, and why is it separate from everything else? Do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to speak for you?
Well, I'm sure we have different answers on that, Marie. So
I don't think so.
Happy to fill in from the city perspective on that one, and my perspective on that budget. But certainly I welcome your comments on that. I was noting to Marie that this is the first biennium, 21-22 is the first biennium where open space vegetation management specifically for trust properties is called out in its own CIP line item. In years past, it was actually everything for open space vegetation management was lumped under one larger CIP project. And this was supremely unhelpful for me as I was trying to manage that budget and making sure that resources were allocated appropriately to all the different open spaces. And also not just in terms of dollars per acre, but also in terms of level of service. We know that Pioneer Park does receive a slightly higher level of service per policy. And so, it made a lot of sense for us to be tracking that separately. And I was doing that on the back end for several biennia, but we decided to formalize it this time. And I think it's also worth noting that the operations and maintenance levy that Jesse was mentioning expires in 2023, has specific funds that are allocated just for Pioneer Park in there. So there are some that are just for general open space and some that are specified for Pioneer Park. So pulling those into a separate line item also made sense operationally, really, for us in terms of budget management. That's what I will say about that. I do want to make clear that both for the open space vegetation management line item and the Pioneer Park and Engstrom open space vegetation management line items, these are large amounts of money. And although they really only have one title on them, I want to be really clear about what's included in those, because they fund many different functions within the open spaces. In the case of Pioneer, it funds all the time that goes into maintaining Pioneer. So that's crew time, it is project management, it's all of our contractors, it's also our volunteer management. So those contracts for any events that happen within trust properties. It also funds trail maintenance within Pioneer and Engstrom, and just a number of other things, new signage within the parks, education measures. And, in years past, we've done these larger volunteer events with the whole 6th grade from Islander Middle, and all of that funding has come out of there. So I think it can be a little deceptive that it's only one line item when really this is the amount of money we've been working with for many years that accomplishes a fair amount of work within those properties. And the same is true on the general open space vegetation management budget. It covers a lot of different functions. And maybe we just need to be better about really calling out what all of those different functions are that are couched in this one sort of chunk of money. So
Jesse, one of the things I noticed is between the parks meeting and the packet we got, the budget went from 200 to 191. And then tonight you were showing 180. And I'm just calling people's attention to that because it's really a demonstration of how dire the budget situation is.
Well, and some of it was, I have to say that I made an error, which is happening, and I'm catching them as we continue to work. So I made an error in where the 2021 number started. So those were caught. I cleaned some things up where I had a random number in there that just needed to be rounded, but it is a dire budget. I did go and cut some things because Lisa's seeing a preview of this, but I'm not looking forward to handing this off to the city council, because then we have to figure out how to solve this problem. So yeah, it's staggering.
So, and this presentation, I can tell, was an enormous undertaking. And your little tutorial was also really helpful for me, and for sure for anybody who had time to look at it. I don't know that we have specific things to add to the capital spending plan, but I do think it's worth kind of talking about some philosophical things and putting our support, assuming we support an idea, bring that support to the Parks Commission, and then hopefully it percolates up to other, the city council and whoever else. And one of the things we've talked about a lot in the trust is the concept of should other properties be in the trust? And I think that's a nuanced conversation, and probably tonight it's the overall, should we do it or should we not do it, versus which park should go in and what part of what park. Because I think that's a very difficult decision to make, because unless it's entirely in open space right now, it's not easy to figure it out.
And Maria, I just want to make sure I think you might, that in the draft goals section, there is a goal, and it's a little softer than that, but it says explore.
Evaluate.
Yeah, evaluate. Just because it is nuanced, but I think there's an appetite. I don't want to speak for the council, but I think everyone's interested in that conversation. So.
Right. And so, the way things work is there's a goal, there's objectives, and then there's a recommendation.
Yeah.
And I guess what I am sort of wondering is whether the trust board would want to support a recommendation that we go ahead and do that evaluation. So I'm just going to throw that out and see what people think.
Okay, so since we were talking about budget, is this an offshoot of that conversation where you were thinking that the allocation of specific funds to Pioneer Park sort of shows that it's off in a corner with respect to the other open spaces on the island, and you would recommend that the open spaces be considered as a unit and their funding be allocated as needed under some direction, but with interaction with the park staff. Is that what you're driving toward with this?
Yeah, I think I'm a step back from that, which is, are we as a group supportive of the idea that should be explored and evaluated? The dollars, the dollars, who knows where the dollars are? But certainly if we had a capital raise and land acquisition could be part of it. And that would also entail the concept of, would that be an appropriate time to put properties together? So I guess, you could view it as recommending that we put dollars towards a project, but I guess I'm more interested in the philosophical idea of, does the trust support expanding the trust? Or do we think it should be exclusive to Pioneer Park?
Okay, so we would consider the budget issues as a consequence of this
Right.
idea of just bringing most of the open spaces in the island under the purview of the Open Space Conservancy Trust. Well, we could have a straw poll at this point in time and just have a show of hands of people who are in favor of that. Would the board members like to give a show of hands? I would favor that.
We definitely have some four-legged support in the background for that.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, I love it. I love it. So
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we're clear on process, because at this juncture, we're looking at a pros plan and a goal statement. And so that I imagine that goal statement about exploring this is going to be included. For the action to happen, then the council has to set those items as work items and resource them. And so that's going to be a future conversation, probably down the road in 2022. But I'm at least hearing right now that you definitely support the goal statement. And then Elaine and I will stay connected as we get down the path in 2022 and the council's looking at their future work plan.
Okay, and up to this point, we've talked mostly about budgets and allocations, but I'd like to ask the question to the board. If the selection of projects for this 6-year plan appears to be a good selection, are there any items that you think are missing from the list, or any that you think are on there that might be inappropriate? Now would be a time to speak up with your opinions on that.
May I make another suggestion on that theme? I think one of the risks, if I'm an open space trustee, that I see with a CIP like this is that we don't have enough money for the projects. And that one of the ways we could balance the CIP is by cutting out the non-urgent projects, which would literally be all of the trail projects, except for maybe the Mercerdale Hillside, and cut open space funding. So I imagine the trust does not want that to happen. So I imagine your recommendation would be to preserve at least what's been presented tonight, and even probably seek opportunities to grow, restoration resources as we can. So I want to just put that on the table.
I think we're generally in agreement. Is there anybody who would disagree with that statement, that we want to at least preserve the trail maintenance and building projects that have been proposed?
Absolutely.
I think that's I would generally agree. Personally, I'm happy to see the Hollerbach Trail project on this plan, because that's a resource that's not currently being used. And it's at a location in the island where I think it would be very attractive to the homeowners nearby to go in there and actually make use of that land for walking in.
And I was gonna sort of ask a little further, which is, I'm trying to figure out what sort of support messages I could take to the Parks and Rec Commission on behalf of the trust. And it seems to me like a capital raise is almost essential. We can't do this without a capital raise. And is that a message I could take to the Parks and Rec and say, people here on the trust board support that idea?
So you're talking about some sort of a voted ballot measure, right? To raise capital.
Right. And you know what? One question I did have, are there any if we do a capital raise, is there any restriction? Is there something in the capital plan that would not be qualified for funding that the trust board would care about?
No, I would say no. I think we could put any variety of these projects into a ballot measure. The tool that we use, though, could differ. We have a levy right now that's going to end. That's probably our priority, get that renewed. We may, and the council's got this on my work plan. I think we have so many capital projects right now that need funding. I think we're going to need to talk about what other tool we might use, possibly a companion bond or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little ahead of the council, but I'm also, and Marie's been at the Parks and Rec Commission meetings. I'm just trying to be transparent here that I don't see the path through grants and city resources as they currently stand.
Mm-hmm.
The infrastructure problem that we have in the park system right now.
Yeah, so I guess we'd like to show our support for that. So if you agree with the idea of exploring levies and other funding measures, then show a hand for that. Okay, very good. And
then, so one other thing, just I was going to also ask about donations, and the draft currently talks about the King County tax code. And I did look at that, and what it provides is basically an easement. And after 7 years, it's kind of like you break even. If you want to break away from it and sell your property and convert it to, a non-conservation use, you can. So I kind of feel like that's a stopgap measure and not anywhere near permanent.
Yeah, I agree.
So I was sort of hoping we could add to the concept of just straight up donations. I think that's how we got Engstrom. We paid below market price and they got a tax deduction for the charitable contribution, I would assume.
Yeah.
So I was just hoping that we could add that specifically into the laundry list of how to get money.
Yeah. Yes, and I believe that's also referenced in the goal statement. You know, one of the things that we'll be recommending, I'm pretty sure the Parks and Rec Commission will be recommending with my urging to the city council is that we develop a formal land acquisition strategy. Because to your point, Marie, we have to know what properties we're interested in, right? We do have some. To make sure the community is aware that perhaps you would like to donate your property to the city. We have to formalize the program. We don't have a formal program right now. There's also times when people knock on our door and want to give us their property and we don't want to take it. So we have to be prepared for that as well. But I think the city is ready for this formal land acquisition strategy. And it will also help us deal with those little nagging like trail connections where we need an easement, so we can show it on a map, we can start working on it. Some of these things take 20, 30, 40 years before you can make the acquisition. So that's where I'm headed. Well, I think we need to make sure it's in your goals statement. And then Maria, it should be, we'll make sure it's in our implementation chapter. So that chapter is not drafted yet. That's where we talk about how we do all of this capital stuff.
Okay. And then another area that I thought was not sufficiently discussed, I think, is just the whole concept of parks as educational resources. And again, that's a topic where I'm not sure that's a capital thing, but it's definitely something we've talked about. And actually, in talking with Eileen or Elaine, I'm sorry. We started talking about it, and there are some very inexpensive ways of doing education. It doesn't have to be a sign in the park. It could be an app on your iPhone. And wayfinding could be the same thing. I mean, I can get on Google today and find all the trails in Pioneer Park. So to take advantage of that, it'd be great to have physical signs. I think those are definitely something that needs to be thought about, but it seems like some kind of an app would be a really inexpensive thing to do that would go a long ways to telling people how to get from the north end to the south end. So somehow I would like to highlight education as a purpose of the parks. And I did notice the word education did show up in the discussion of the urban forest planning, but it seemed a little out of context with things like fire breaks and things like that.
Sure. You'll be joining us tomorrow at the Parks and Rec Commission meeting, and our first torturous process is going to be to go back through those goals. And so I will think about, I think education is in there in a couple of places, but if there's an opportunity for an amendment, I'm sure the Parks and Rec Commission will be open to that.
Yeah, it almost, if we were talking about apps, we'd be moving from a goals to an objective.
Yeah.
And then the question becomes, does it go on the 20-year plan just to give it a placeholder? I've been thinking a lot more in terms of what to put in the 20-year plan just to keep it alive, knowing that it may not have dollars assigned to it. And educational opportunities like that is kind of what I've been thinking, maybe it goes there.
So if it's a capital project, valued north of $5,000 to $10,000, it goes on the capital plan. If it's, a program or a smaller project, it probably goes into a different spot, but we can talk.
Well, so maybe it goes into wayfinding because the physical plan obviously would be more than $5,000 or $10,000, but the description could certainly include an app. And if we got to it sooner, that'd be great. I almost feel like, is there an Eagle Scout out there who wants to do the app for us?
Yeah,
Sure.
I suppose that might work.
Sure. That
Jerry had
might
a
also be
question.
something for you to put on your work plan as your trust work plan.
Yes. I think Jerry had a question earlier.
Yeah. So
Yeah, my
Go ahead, Jerry.
question was where we just took kind of a hand poll about expanding the trust properties. Not clear on what the question was, and what the outcome was, and I would love to hear more from staff and consider that question more
Sure.
thoroughly.
So at this point, it is going into what's actually an objective. It's going into an objective statement in the pros plan. And I don't have it in front of me, but the word is explore or evaluate the possible expansion of the trust. If you'd like to make a stronger recommendation, you could go straight to the council and recommend that it be added as a work item. This will be headed to the council in the first quarter of next year. So I don't think that's necessary. I will tell you behind the scenes, I have an attorney evaluating the trust and the structure and looking at actually the mechanics of what that would involve. So I'm preparing for the city council to ask me to evaluate this in 2022 or 2023.
And that's exactly what you just said is where I'm comfortable being. So I just wanted to understand that more clearly. Thanks.
Okay, in fairness, I did ask if anybody was opposed to this idea, but since I only saw 3 hands out of the 6 regular trust members, so if you think that we should keep our focus on Pioneer Park and Engstrom open space, then you should raise a hand to show your support for that idea now. Okay. Anyone else in dissent of the idea of expanding the purview of the Open Space Conservancy Trust?
I'm in support of evaluating it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm with
And that's
Jerry
all
because, sorry, I was going to say I'm with Jerry because I still don't feel like I have enough information to be able to judge, right? At this point, it would just be on gut instinct, and I don't know that that's a responsible way. I just would like to hear more after Jesse's exploratory process with the attorney, what the implications and the logistics of doing so would actually be.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I can say there's general support for exploring the possibility of transferring more properties into the trust in the future.
Yeah, and that's really all I mean, none of us knows anything about implementing it. One thing I do always kind of wonder is, I mean, putting stuff into a trust is a very long process. I don't know if there's informal ways. I mean, if we decide we want to go there, are there informal ways that don't involve the cost of, restructuring a trust and God knows how many consents you need?
I imagine that would be part of the exploration.
Right. I just want to make sure that, is there only one solution or are there several solutions? That's all.
When the city council, right before the pandemic, established a goal of, coming up with some mechanisms to better protect parks, open space trails. And we, of course, got completely disrupted by the pandemic. But I imagine there would be multiple tools considered. And one of the easier ones that I'd really like to look at is a parks and open space zone.
Mm-hmm.
And, all the tools we have, they could be undone at some point in the future, but we're trying to set that bar high enough so that it takes a lot of steps. So I think there's other options as well. And that was what the charge was 2 years ago. Now, this February at the council planning session, we'll revisit this topic and it'll be tied to the pros plan update. And we'll see where the council is, where they'd like to go. Look at all the other work items on our plate. This is still a pretty high priority for the council. Haven't talked with them about it for a couple of years, but knowing the 7 of them and the 7 that will be here in January, I suspect it will be a priority.
Right. I mean, I think those are sort of 2 separate. One is protect the land so it doesn't go away. The second question that probably ought to be considered is there a benefit or a negative to unifying open space so that there's one conversation about how to do weed control, for example. And I think they're both really necessary conversations.
Absolutely.
Let's see. I did want to briefly mention to everybody the kinds of things that found their way into the revisions, just to kind of make you feel and just to let you know that your contributions have been heard. One of them is, we've had a lot of conversations about parking. That's now a specific call out in the sort of objectives, is that we need to figure out how parking works at our parks. There is a comment about promoting Pioneer Park as a demonstration park. One thing I say, Jesse, is it now says demonstration park for illustrating best forest practices. I actually think of it as a broader goal to include things like education on ecology. So I would broaden the definition of what it means to be a demonstration park.
We are going to talk about that one tomorrow, Marie. So bring your revision.
Okay. There's a discussion about limiting creation of inferior services, which I know that we're also concerned about. And then Jerry, I think you in particular were concerned about, establishing new partnerships, and that's made its way into the objectives as well. And I do think that might be worth highlighting tomorrow, because Pioneer Park is very dependent on partnerships, and two that we depend on are gone away. And it's important that we find substitutes, whether it's some kind of community outreach or another organization. I did have a question. Was anybody aware of the fact that there's a group called Pioneer Park for Use? Do you know what they are, Craig? Well, I couldn't find any information about what they actually do. So I don't know. Maybe I'll give them a call and say, hey. I think that's pretty much all I had to say. Programs. Oh, I did also want to mention the rating structure, because you did bring it up. It's a difficult question, and Elaine and I spent some time talking about that too, because as a general matter, Pioneer Park probably wouldn't rate very high on the ratings system, simply because things like safety get both more points and more weight. So I think it's really important for us as a trust board to be thinking about, what qualities would move things up, even if it didn't rate highly. And I think Jesse talked about the fact that the community very much supports trails, brings trails up higher, but that's something that we should just keep in the back of our mind and sort of think about how to support things that we consider important, but maybe not wouldn't rate terribly high.
What Marie's referring to is in the 20-year capital facilities list. It's basically just a long list of all the projects. The Parks Commission developed a tool to help rank projects, and it's just one tool. It does lean heavily to projects that are in trouble and a safety risk, and so they automatically elevate. In our park system right now, we have many high ticket items that fall into that category. But it is just one tool, and hopefully through this process, we're taking in all the other feedback, right? Because I have to say, trails and open space is pretty high priority, and yet it's not in the verge of, not all those projects are on the verge of failure, like the docks and playgrounds. And
yes, I think if you look at what actually made it into the 6-year capital improvement plan, it reflects heavier weighting of the input from the community as compared to the weightings that were used for rating the projects on the 20-year plan. So it's clear that you're responsive to the community in the selection of projects for the shorter term.
we definitely try to do both, right?
Yeah.
We don't feel that we can continue to sacrifice trails projects just because the rest of the infrastructure is in big trouble and it's expensive.
We are kind of running short on time. I think if you have further comments, you can forward those to Marie to be presented and discussed tomorrow, or any one of the staff members on the call. But this was very instructive, and I think the general response the board has been positive to to the selection of projects, and the budget concerns are something that need to be worked out. So we'll be following that with interest. Are there any general comments before we close?
Oh, thanks, Jesse, for the tutorial and the presentation. And it's nice to have a little bit of a jump on this issue before it comes before full council. So.
Surprise. Thank you all for squeezing this in tonight. I know it was a special meeting for you. I really appreciate your time and the discussion.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation.
Thank
It was
you.
valuable for us too. Thanks.
All
Thank you,
right.
Jesse.
Good night,
Unless
all.
there are any objections, I believe we are adjourned.
I would like to.
Oh, okay.
I
one more
want to
thing.
just remind everyone that we do have a regularly scheduled meeting for November 18th, which is just in a few short weeks. So, so I'll be sending out some information about that shortly, but
Okay.
just a reminder that we have back-to-back here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we are adjourned.
All right. I
Mm.